Hey y'all, I'm Dr. Alice Hoyt with Food Allergy and your kiddo. I'm so excited that you're here to watch this video or listen to this podcast because we are interviewing Dr. Hugh Windom of the Food Allergy Center of Florida today. Dr. Windom has been doing oral immunotherapy for years. He and his team are fantastic. So today, Dr. Windom and I are going to talk all about OIT. He trained at Hopkins, he trained at Duke. He is amazing. He's also very, very nice, and he takes great care of his patients. You're going to love this conversation.
Welcome to Food Allergy and Your Kiddo with Dr. Alice Hoyt, the podcast about demystifying food allergies, diminishing allergy anxiety, and taking back control. Let's navigate this challenge together with evidence-based information, scientific research, and tried and proven practices. And now, here's your host, board-certified allergist and immunologist specializing in food allergy, Dr. Alice Hoyt.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Windom. I'm so excited to talk to you today because you are one of the nationwide experts in oral immunotherapy. You've been helping families with this for years now, and I just thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, Alice, thank you very much. It's my honor, and I'm happy to speak and hear what you're doing, what we're doing, and hopefully provide some for patients to learn about what we can do for the allergies.
Yes, absolutely. I love it. Okay, I'm going to dive right in with the when, the why, and the how did you start doing oral immunotherapy? Some background on that for a lot of our listeners who are new to the food allergy world, who might be hearing all about Palforzia and OIT. A few years ago, this wasn't as commonplace, but you and your practice have been providing this fantastic therapy for years now. So the when, the why, how did you guys start doing it?
Well, it's a long story, but when I was in training at Johns Hopkins, I considered myself, well, they did a lot of food allergy treatment back there and diagnosis with food challenges, and they had their nurse, chef, whatever, blinding these foods, all these little recipes. So I came out of their training kind of a foodophobic. I was afraid of it because I had no way going to private practice. I have a staff member to mix foods and a nurse to do this. I was by myself. I basically had one front office person. So it wasn't made for me. It was more intense than I could handle. So years went by that all we did was, as you said, we didn't have treatment for food allergy. We gave EpiPens and we hoped for the best. But back in about 2010, I got to know Richard Wasserman. We were on the board of the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. And I saw what he was doing. And I visited his clinic in Dallas. And then I visited Lou Mendelson in Connecticut, who has a very large center up there in Hartford. And then it took me about 2 years to kind of get ready to do it after meeting those guys and going over their protocols. About 2014, we started up. And I finally had an associate, which helped because it's kind of tough on your own, but people can do it. I had a bigger office, which helped than I started out with. So that everything lined up and we were ready to go. So we had patients who had already identified in my first years of practice when we weren't offering it. And I would call them and they'd come in. We'd say, we're now doing food therapy. And it's evolved. So it's been since about 2014. And every year we're doing more and more. We're learning new tricks. We're changing our protocols. We're making updates based on what we're learning from our patients. We're trying to make it easier for them, cutting down the frequency of dosing over the years. So it's just always evolving. So if you have any of my old protocols, they're probably old after about a month because we change them all the time. But just small changes, kind of fine tuning just to make things better. So it's been a great adventure, and I'm excited to hear you're doing it, and so many more doctors are, because for a while there it was difficult. Patients would travel hours and hours, and we have some international patients. But fortunately, it's getting a little bit easier. We have more people in Florida. They might start in our clinic, and then we can refer them back to finish up after they've gotten through their tough early doses. So more and more people are doing it. It's becoming more mainstream, and I think it's accepted as the proper way to treat patients who need it.
Yes, no, I think you're hitting the nail on the head that even allergists that are not fully engaged yet with doing OIT from the very beginning, from the starting doses, that they're becoming more and more comfortable with sort of taking the reins when somebody like yourself starts it. And at that point, a family's already been so plugged in, already knows the safety parameters. They're informed, they're engaged families. And so I wanted to ask you, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see not just in families with food allergies, but when they're starting OIT and then going through that OIT process. And it probably varies by age of the kiddo.
It's not just the patient, of course, it's the whole family. So it takes a while. We fortunately have a food coordinator who prepares all the foods. There's a lot of communication with the families. So she's answering all the questions. She's coming up with our help with creative recipes to make food palatable. A lot of time, last question brochure people can go through. So when they're getting started, we provide all the information. We encourage them to ask questions. Some of them, as you may know, are knowledgeable. They're looking this stuff up. They've had this 6-year-old allergic to food since he was 1. So they've been dealing with it for 5 years, and they know a lot about it. A few of them bring it up, but for the most part, they come in with an agenda. They want to solve a very frustrating problem.
Right.
So we just help them out with the details, correct any misconceptions, let them know how we can do it. And the idea you mentioned of transferring back to their doctor at home is really easy. And that doctor kind of loves it because the patient, by the time 4 or 5 doses, they know exactly what's going on. They're weighing the dose. Basically, I go back home and sit in his office, and you can show him what you're weighing. You can take it, and you can just make sure you don't have a reaction. And after a while, they get kind of into it. That's easy. It makes sense, and they joy in the family's eyes. So they become adapters to the process pretty quickly when they see that. So it works out great. It's an education process, and they have to be on board. And we see amazed by the things that kind of slip through the cracks. We thought we could people to go, am I done? I'm like, no, you're not done. This is an ongoing process. You were just built up over these last 6 months. Now you're going to maintain once a day, kind of indefinitely. So they get far enough what the plan was. Doesn't happen often, but we always then change our consent forms and our information forms to make sure we highlight some of those things so they don't miss that point. But things happen. But for the most part, it's very smooth. We try to let them know there are risks, of course, but they're not common, and you're ready to deal with it because you're facing your enemy at that moment in time. It's not a surprise when grandma has your child at the fair and they have an accidental exposure, and you're looking for your EpiPen. You're doing it at home when the child's resting, so everybody's ready to take care of it. And it works out really well. So it's not for everybody, and we can talk about that too. But it's for those that are motivated and are burdened enough by the process. It's a great way to change their life and put that allergy behind them. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Talk us through that for a second. About we've talked on the podcast a lot about oral immunotherapy, and that start with a very small dose, and every few weeks you take that dose every day, and then every few weeks go into the allergist office for an up dose for a little bit more every at least 2 weeks, or 2 weeks really no earlier in my office. We won't up dose any earlier than 2 weeks, but we'll space it out if we need to, no problem. And then you get to the maintenance dosing around 6 months, depending on how many step ups you have or up doses, and then you stay on it indefinitely. Talk to us about, you mentioned some misconceptions family have. So talk to us about some of the misconceptions, and then also about how you set goals with families about what the outcome of OIT could be for their kiddo.
Right. So you definitely want to connect that you're both on the same trajectory, the same goals you have in mind. We focus on safety. We always tell the kid with a peanut or cashew, whatever it is, we're not here to make you the peanut eating champion of your neighborhood or your school. You're going to be safe by accidental exposure, but you're not going to be gobbling them down. Now, some are lucky. The kids that we start in the 0 to 5 range, they might turn off allergy and they may well be eating peanut butter and jelly for 10. But we don't promise that. We aim for safety. If we hit the jackpot and their numbers go down and they truly can't eat a lot, that's wonderful, but that's not our goal. So we make that clear from the get-go that we're out for safety. And then we tell them that it's a bit of a burden. You got to do it every day, but we tell them it's not a drug. You don't have to go to the pharmacy. It's just a food you're going to buy in the grocery store, and you have to eat it. Yes, you have to kind of hang out for a couple hours, 2 hours typically. You don't have to sit still. You can walk around the house and do normal things. You just can't go jump on the trampoline and play basketball. And they understand that. And there's always typically a quiet time after dinner or sometime when they're doing homework that the person allow them to go to sleep in a young child, as long as they kind of for an hour to kind of watch them, they can go to sleep after that. They can go to school in the morning after the first hour, if they want to have PE the first period, or they're old enough to know not to run around the flagpole where 5 or 6. So there's a lot of flexibility. We allow various times a day for the dose. They can dose 8 a.m. one day and 8 p.m. the next. There's plenty. They can stay. We try to make it as palatable as possible because we want them to succeed. Now, we have limitations on that flexibility, but for the most part, they have a lot of room to wiggle. We make arrangements for summer trips, for camps, but inevitably, some so they may stop. We don't consider a failure. 6, when the family's all really scared about starting elementary school, if we can bridge that 3 or 4 year period to 11, they want to stop them. At least they got through all that period.
Yeah.
Now the kid's a little more responsible, and if he wants to limit his intake, he can. So it's really considered a failure. I think they would indefinitely, and we try to make that easy too by cutting a couple times a week.
That was going to be my next question of when do you sort of say, okay, well, we can try to space out some. You've been on maintenance for X long, your test looks no reaction.
Yeah, we're pretty nice. I always say to doing to others, you're doing it, not doing it yourself, and I would hate the burden with an everyday thing. So I put myself in the position. We have 4 kids. I can imagine each kid differently and all the things that the life brings to your plate. And this one kid demands so much darn time that we try to bring it down. So after 1 year, they go to 6 days a week. Then each year we cut it down. So if they do really well after that second year, we do a high dose challenge where we bring them in and challenge them to 3 times the dose they're on. So if they're on 3 peanuts or 3 cashews, we'll do 9 of those things to show they have a safety cushion in case they're accidentally exposed. And they have a lot of cushion to bring the frequency down. So if they pass that challenge and they're on 6 days, we might go to 5 or 4 or 5 days, a weekend off. 3 days, we bring them right down, and we're checking their blood tests once a year for reasons we don't know. We just do it, and we think it's meaningful, and we all get excited when it goes down. But sometimes it plateaus. But as long as our challenge, we know we have achieved our safety. We just haven't had the labs follow through.
Repeat the challenge.
We want to go down, so they want to we say we're going to repeat the challenge. They went down. There's really no reason to challenge because you already proved the previous year they passed a high dose. But once they go down a day or 2, we want to make sure we haven't lost that protection. So so if they want to go down, we say drop in. We'll do the high dose challenge. So once again, that just 3 days a week works. If they're on 1 day a week, we're going to do the challenge too. We want to make sure that we haven't put them in danger. And the challenge is just a 1 hour visit. They come in.
I was going to ask you, is it like a traditional ingestion challenge of like a little more, or is it more of a
single dose? It's a single dose.
Single dose.
So if they're eating 3 peanuts at home, they're going to eat if they eat 3 peanuts the day before they come in, they're eating 9 peanuts with us. Just like they would have had a bite of a candy. Oh my gosh, there were 9 peanuts in that. We want to show that they have that safety up to 3 times their dose. It's 3 times actually. 3, I think we may have, and it was probably very mild. It was very mild, so we don't. So they just don't react. They really have that cushion if they're truly dosing regularly.
That's so nice.
It is, and the patients love cutting back, and I mean I think that keeps us from losing people because they get frustrated. Oh, we can't take it. He's fighting me on this. We say, well, look, if he keeps it up for the next 6 months, we'll challenge him. He can go down a couple of days, and that kind of motivates them. So,
how often do you find kiddos get really tired, either tired of the taste or they still really detest the taste of whether it be peanut or whatever their allergen is?
Yeah, that is a problem. And we always look at mom or dad and say, you guys got to become creative. You got to find ways to mix it and hide it in things. They can usually find something, but there is that, for instance, in the peak, you can find that darn food in whatever thing you hid it in and drives them nuts. I don't know if we've lost anybody on taste. May have. It just adds up. It's between taste, it's between rebellion. I just don't want to do what I'm told to do, and they're 12 or something. So a lot of reasons why they struggle, but parents are trying hard. But inevitably, we'll have someone duplicate a year follow-up, and we'll call, and they'll say, "Oh, we stopped 6 months ago." And it doesn't happen often, but it does. And they put a lot of effort into not stopping. Yeah. So we don't at all criticize them. We just feel badly for them. But we'll still repeat the lab at some point to see what it does. And some people kind of hang in there and they do all right. They probably have some safety. We're not going to challenge them per se, but we just do the best we can to kind of cheer them along and keep them going. And the success rate's really good, so it's encouraging.
That's wonderful. Talk with us too about teenagers, because teenagers can be a very exciting group to work with. At the same time, systems are so robust that their reactions can also be robust. So when you have kiddos who are in college or about to go to college, but they themselves they are motivated to do OIT, what are some of the questions that you and Dad have?
Teenagers just don't do as well too. I mean, you have all those social issues that are going on, but from a medical response rate, 0 to 5 is great. We say, thank goodness you came early. 5 to 10, and we say, hey, that's fine. We're going to take care of you. You'll do fine. We say, when you see us earlier, where have you been? We don't make them feel bad, but we say, I would have been to do your son when he was. But they're here. We say, this is where we are. So let's deal with what we have. It's like finding that tumor later. It'd be nice if you found that tumor early. So when we get them later, we just tell them it may be a little rougher ride. As far as cooperation, they can be motivated. They're all right. They've dealt with it a long time. And if they're just learning about it, they can be really excited because now they're going out with friends. And if they're 13, 14, they're going to the sleepovers. They know what they're missing. So the motivation is really appreciated more than a young kid who's really doing it for mom because mom's controlling the whole thing or dad. These kids, they're getting a little independence and they want more independence. So they can be motivated. We just struggle with them sometimes. So we're doing the best we can. And if they have reactions, we go slower. But it's amazing how low dose works. We had one he was about 10 years old, and he, for COVID, didn't come for a year. He was only on 10 ml, 2 teaspoons of milk. And we aimed for 60 or so. So he still had a little ways to go. We didn't see him for a year. He came back, and his numbers had dropped tremendously. He was over 100. His IG went down to 25.
That's
so
awesome.
Low dose works.
That low dose, yes, low dose is
10 ml is 10 ml is 330 milligrams of protein because an ounce of milk is 1 gram. So 10 ml is about a third of a gram of protein. That's where that peanut product is. So that's actually a dose that can work. So we don't get and when it comes to milk and egg, staple foods, the dose is not important. There's other egg and milk products. Another child came back a year follow-up and I said, I'm not dosing. He goes, I'm not dosing. I thought, oh, you quit? He goes, no, I mean cottage cheese, pizza. I just love dairy products. I said, okay, it's cool. His numbers have gone down. His skin test was negative. It's hard to measure someone's protein content, all those foods. You diet with egg and milk situations. We don't eat cashew or hazelnuts.
Right.
But when it comes to the dose, we really lower that down to once or twice a week pretty quickly if they're not a vegetarian and they're actually eating these other products. So those guys are almost the easiest when they're on maintenance because they can really gobble up normal amounts of food protein without being sat down for a dose. So it works out differently for, like I said, different ages, for different foods. It's all exciting and fun. And,
what I love hearing is how much the fancy term shared decision making is really happening. It's not just you, and it's not just you and mom, and it's not just mom or dad, and it's not just the kiddo. It's really everybody figuring out the best approach together. And I just think that that's so important, especially in healthcare right now, especially in something like oral immunotherapy, where we really do, especially in our older kiddos, we have to have their motivation. And I think especially sort of that 10 to 14 age can be very tough because they've been told for years, don't eat this, it could hurt you, it could kill you. And so they're coming to terms with this what death is. And so then they're like, oh no, I don't want to touch this at all. What has that age group been challenging for your practice? With the parents are super motivated, but the kiddos are like, no, or what's been y'all's experience?
Yeah, so we've had some we've not started because of that. They're not in agreement because the kid has to be.
Yeah.
A lot of time it is a parent that's fired up, but the kid's not. But the idea of having a nutritionist in your office is phenomenal. I think that's what you do. We would love to have one because there's different tricks to deal with the nutrition aspect. And actually, from a psychologist standpoint, I'd love to have a psychologist for that matter. We've had kids have to go see one or a psychiatrist because you've been told to not drink, and all of a sudden you're pouring milk down their throat. Can't handle it. So they really have that ingrained belief they should be eating this food, so they struggle with it. But that's it's few and far between. It's not a lot, but they're there, and they just need a little extra, little TLC to get them through that process. But we always say you can always stop. It's not you don't have to stay committed to it. You can stop, but it's one of the more intense things we do. I mean, we've been trained to take care of things like asthma. Yes, a chronic disease, and yes, you have to take their inhaler. We see them once a year or so. And they're going to take it most of the time. This is every day. A lot more risk if you mess up. We've had some kids cheat on us and drinking milk. They drink soy milk, and the mom doesn't know, or they throw the peanuts on the couch. So that kind of stuff. And then when they do dose, it can be a serious reaction.
Yeah.
So this is much more intense than anything else we've ever done in medicine, and requires, like you said, a much more involved shared decision making. And we can talk about how important it is if you're an alien, but in reality, they can figure that out, and if they're feeling good, they have to. But this is much more serious. So you'll be more engaged in these patients than you would ever in any other patient that we take care of.
Mm-hmm.
But it's rewarding too.
Yes. No, I mean, I love it. That's why that's what I do now. It's just food allergy.
Well, that's really great.
Talk with us about Palforzia, because Palforzia, for people who have not heard of Palforzia is the FDA approved peanut oral immunotherapy product that's currently approved for kiddos ages 4 to 17. They can start between those ages. Talk to us about your experience with it, how it's become a tool in your toolkit, or has it not become a tool in your toolkit, and just your thoughts on it.
You knew it'd come because the practitioners in the country and actually the world have been doing OIT for over a decade, and Big Pharma felt out, so they had to somehow get their hands in there and get a product. They created this peanut flour in a capsule. Well, we get peanut flour and applesauce. It's the same stuff. They just put it in a capsule and charge a lot of money for it. What I do appreciate is they did a lot of good research, though. They really brought credibility to what we do. So I appreciate the science. We can it ourselves. It's just to do that when you're in private practice, to do all these studies. We've published abstracts and published in journals, but we can't do it at the level they do. So they provide value to our service. I think all it did was solidify the belief that OIT works. So it enhanced what we do. It kind of a star on our hat, but it hasn't changed what we do. I see no reason to buy peanut flour in a capsule when we can buy a bag of 5 pounds of flour for about $20. They don't need to spend $10,000 a year on those capsules. We get past the flour, like the second visit, they're past the flour. We go to peanut fractions. When you weigh yourself, a fingernail snippet of peanut, a very small amount. We go to that in their second or third visit. So we're not even on the flour very long. And they're eating peanuts, and they're buying planters at the grocery store. So again, why do they need this capsule? We're much more flexible. We're not stuck with our doses that have been approved by the FDA. We can cut the dose in half and a third. These parents become great scientists in their peanuts or cashews. So they would adjust. If they're not feeling well, they can cut down in half. They can do all this on their own. And once the peanuts, there's really always be on Palforzia. And most people in the studies did shift over to peanut. We were involved in the studies here, and our patients did shift over to peanut. They realized after a while, why don't I just eat a peanut? So there's not a whole lot of value there. There may be some insurance reasons to do it if it's covered by insurance, but to me, that's just ripping somebody else off. So I'd much rather do it in the right way, the whole way. So that's what we do. And but it's out there. It may help as a crutch to some allergists that aren't doing food therapy to get them on board. But for those of us that are doing it, it really wasn't a big deal, except that we appreciate the acknowledgement that OIT works, which they provided for us. So we're waiting for something new. I mean, we've been involved in the patch studies here as well. Um, and that I
Talk to
thought
us
that
a
would be
little bit about the patch studies because we haven't talked
right.
a whole lot about patch on the
Yeah,
podcast.
we're always looking for something better, whether it's our allergy shots that we give our patients for hay fever. We're trying to find something better there over the years. We're always trying to find something that's easier, safer, less expensive. Um, so this patch idea made a lot of sense. You transdermal through your skin, absorb a very small amount in a safe way. So it sounded really exciting. And others in the country joined that company as their medical advisor. You're allowed to be a thing and do it. But they've had struggles. They really have.
Hmm.
The adherence of the patch was a problem, which they've worked on. The efficacy, my God, it took about 2 years for the IG to start going down. It was actually sensitizing kids in the early going. It was low dose. We know low dose actually stimulates IgEs until you get to a point that actually turned it down. So their IG was doubling, tripling in the first year or two. Finally, by year 3, they're starting to go down. That's a long haul. And you think, oh, it's easy. Just put a patch on. But you got to wear it 24 hours. Kids
Yeah.
didn't like it.
So
They
when you
went
say a
back and
patch,
like,
you mean it looks like a little Band-Aid and you put
yeah,
it on
yeah,
and it's infused with some form of peanut or
right,
whatever the allergen is, and they wear it all the time. And the concept is to teach the immune system to tolerate it,
right.
which is a great concept. And
Exactly.
of course, what you're saying of the concept of just having a patch is so nice, but there definitely have been some challenges with it. So that's
Yeah,
good that things are looking better now. And I'm so happy to hear that you guys are involved in that.
yeah. Well, I don't know if that'll ever come to fruition. It may, but they're struggling with it. And I think in compliance with putting a patch on the sweaty kids, it falls off 2 hours later. So it's a challenge. It may be for the most of the person who don't want it in their GI tract. It could be useful. So again, if we get more tools in our toolbox, that's great. But I don't think it's going to be a dominant one. And the other biggie would be the sublingual. If you want to go into there.
Yes, let's talk about sublingual or
So
slit.
exactly. So we talk about subcutaneous is allergy shots, subcutaneous immunotherapy, oral immunotherapy is by mouth, and sublingual immunotherapy is under the tongue
And
and
for our
lymphatic.
listeners,
Mhm.
subcutaneous immunotherapy is not a form of immunotherapy for foods. That is
Right.
for venoms like honeybee stings and for pollens or air allergens. But
That's right.
there's no subcutaneous immunotherapy for foods yet. There is oral immunotherapy,
You're
and there
correct.
is
Correct.
the patch transdermal
And normal. Right.
immunotherapy that is still experimental. But I don't think anybody in private practice is doing that either because it's so involved. I mean, I know you're involved with studies. I don't think anybody's doing that outside of a study. I'm not sure how they would.
No, no, they wouldn't do it outside the study. No, because that's the whole problem. Is making that darn patch.
Yeah.
So no one would be doing that. And you're right. All those forms of immunotherapy, I was referring more to the field of allergy that we're comfortable with as allergists, is desensitizing people to various things, as you mentioned, from insects to aero allergens to ragweed, whatnot. But with food, we are still with oral. Transdermal may come. But sublingual is exciting. Sublingual has been around for a long time in the field of allergy for hay fever, for aero allergens, environmental allergens. Done more in Europe than the U.S., but it has done here in Florida with oak tree pollen being our huge pollen for 2 months in the spring. We're doing sublingual oak for our hay fever patients who their eyes and nose are a mess in the spring. Some
And talk
companies that
about
did,
what sublingual, what the process, what it really involves. Like, what would a patient expect if they were about to embark on sublingual immunotherapy?
exactly. So again, the shots in the arm, the orals in the mouth, the sublingual's under the tongue, and we're giving you the allergen you're allergic to. So if it's peanut, we're going to give you peanut flour in solution, a liquid, just like you would take oral liquid. You take a lot smaller amount of the tongue. You don't need the larger amount. And you just place it under the tongue and you hold it for 2 minutes. And we're talking about 0.1, 0.2 mLs. Very small amount, a teaspoon. We're talking about
Mm,
it's
tiny.
1/20th, 1/25th of a teaspoon. So very small. Put it under your tongue. You should hold it for 2 minutes. I mean, it's not that much volume, but always
Mm.
wait for your tongue. And you 2 minutes, and then you're normal. You can swallow whatever, and you can't drink for 5 minutes. So, and then your day starts. So that's about it. I don't know about the wait period. I think it's going to be much less necessary because this is a much safer way to go. If you compare what we know about
The observation
sublingual,
period
the wait
after
period,
a
the
dose.
2-hour period, exactly, that is so critical to oral immunotherapy. May not be as important with sublingual. If you look at sublingual aeroallergens, the airborne stuff, compared to the allergy shots, sublingual is much safer. We have reactions to our allergy shots. You have very few reactions to sublingual. So I mentioned oak tree. There's companies that are now making dust mite sublingual, grass sublingual, ragweed. So the technique is there for other diseases. So it makes sense to do it for foods. And it's been done. I mean, some of the early studies were back in 2008, 2009, before food OIT even took off. And it worked well. And it's amazing how it kind of disappeared. OIT kind of just stormed to the forefront. And OIT came on with gangbusters. I mean, Dr. Wassman, some of the other guys that started it, they were aiming for 8 peanuts, the top dose. They challenged you to 3 times that to 24 peanuts, which is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And they were showing it worked. So everybody's like, wow, look how good that is. And sublingual was the safe way. It was hedging to 3 to 4 peanuts. Not much more than that. And we have people go, oh my gosh, that's no good. OIT can go to 24 peanuts. So sublingual just got booted. But now our goal of going to 8 peanuts has changed. That Palvoisia, the peanut flour in a capsule, the FDA approved product, is only a third of a peanut. Yeah, right. No, I'm sorry, it's about 1 peanut. So 300 milligrams of protein, which is about 1 large peanut. So they only go to 1 peanut, not 8 peanuts. So we're like, whoa, they're only going to 1 peanut, and they put a lot of time in the study. They're starting saying maybe we don't need 8. So everybody's cut down to 1 or 2 or 3 peanuts, and we're aiming all of our food in that range of 500 milligrams to a gram of protein. So if we're going for safety now, we're talking about sublingual again. Sublingual was kicked off the table because it couldn't provide hefty protection.
Right.
But now that we're talking about a safe dose, now you got to bring sublingual back into the discussion. It wins down. It wins big time when it comes to safety of the whole process. So you don't have the reactions of the build-up phase process. You can have epinephrine and OIT, but in sublingual, it's almost unheard of. So we're real excited now to start, as our new patients come in, looking at those older kids. You mentioned 10 to 14, any teenage years, and even the 5 to 10-year-olds that may have huge levels and have had huge reactions in the past. We're thinking they might have a much better course.
Yeah.
And for a while, we thought sublingual would be a bridge to oral immunotherapy. But I think it might be a road to the end all by itself. I don't know why you have to bridge. If you can get protected to 3 to 4 peanuts, what are you bridging for?
Right.
So
it all comes back to what the goal is.
Right. If you get sublingual and do well, and you want 3 days a week, put something on your tongue for 2 minutes a day, now we're talking about easy, and they're not going to have anybody dropping out from taste or worried about that rest. So that's our horizon for Dr. Hoyt's practice.
Well, I think it's all so exciting that there are stars like for long. The only for food allergy families was here's your EpiPen, here's your action plan, avoid, see you next year. And I mean, it's just disheartening for families. It's so disheartening for physicians that is was for so long. And so now it's definitely exciting that there are options. But all that to say that it comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of who is desensitization right for. And I saw an advertisement the other day saying take a proactive approach to peanut allergy, and it was for and I very much disagree with that message, because avoidance is still a plan. You have to be in the right season. Your family has to be in the right season of life in order to commit to doing oral immunotherapy or sublingual immunotherapy or participating in research of patch. And it is proactive to be engaging with your allergist and talking about what therapies are becoming available, when might be a good time for my son or my daughter to participate in a
Right.
desensitization protocol. So I just want to, I know we're talking a lot about desensitization, immunotherapy, and it's so important, but I just want to give a shout out to the families out there who maybe have felt by some of their food allergy friends like, oh, you should be desensitization. It is such a personal decision. It is such a family focused decision that you have to make, and you are being proactive having those discussions, which is why it's so important to see your allergist every year, because there's so much coming out that
Right.
is on the horizon.
Well, that's a great point. I get worried when money is involved. I just want to be even doctors. I mean, I think it may get pushed sometimes more than they should. And it's one thing to push a drug on somebody for a disease that's going to help them. I like that benefit. But when it comes to the whole, it comes with a risk. And if they're not motivated to do it, they shouldn't do it. It's not for everybody. Mm-hmm. We have people who really should not be doing OIT. They're very content.
Yes.
I remember this one young adult said, I never had peanut butter, but I eat sunflower butter, and my wife says it's better, so I don't even care. So he's happy. Right. He was a country boy. He ate his sunflower butter every day on a sandwich. So he had interest in eating that. So we don't want to push this, but unfortunately, when companies are involved, they want to sell as much drug as they can. I do fear that they will reach out to allergists who aren't engaged in this and might make it easy to do it. That would be a mistake. I hope it doesn't go beyond allergists to anybody else doing it. So that's not good. It should be people that are committed to it, to understand it's just one of the many things we can do with patients. And in fact, years of treatment for food therapy proves to us it's possible not doing anything. It's quite possible just to avoid and be careful. For those people who unfortunately don't succeed in their careful behavior or are just too burdened psychologically, they really want to get over it, that we're here to help. So great point. And we need to be balanced.
We wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to talk to our allergist listeners and our physician listeners, our nurse listeners. There's an amazing conference coming up. I know it's amazing because I have attended it before, and it is absolutely amazing. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about the conference coming up in Dallas and some of the amazing topics all about the food allergy and immunotherapy.
Yeah, it's actually a unique meeting from a physician point. We typically go to these big national meetings with sponsorship from companies, and it's all big hula and big dinners and exhibit halls and all this Asian people trying to convert you into doing. This is a doctor-run group. It's called FAST, Food Allergy Support Team. And the Food Allergy Support Team we created about 4 or 5 years ago. It's our 5th annual meeting, so 5 years ago. And it was just a group of allergists doing OIT, and we thought we needed to share what we were doing with each other, and we had to help new people. Our national organizations, our allergy organizations, weren't on board with this. They didn't think this is really what they could get involved with. Bigger groups have to, be a little more careful and check every box and make sure everybody's happy with the way they do things. So I understand that. But patients were waiting, so we didn't want to wait for them to come around to the drug come down on the market or some other level of approval they needed. So we started this group to educate our doctors, and we've trained so many. These folks have come to this national meeting. We have online kind of a bulletin board thing where doctors exchange ideas and thoughts. So this meeting is it's what we say it's the most efficient meeting. You come in Friday afternoon, you're out Saturday afternoon. So it's quick, wham, bam, 20-minute talks, all practical about the office setup, staffing, dosing, food sources, varieties of food sources, what to do with reactions during buildup, what to do with the reactions during maintenance, alternatives like SLIT, the sublingual immunotherapy. So it covers the whole waterfront of food, and it's been a great in the past. This year in June, it's going to be another great meeting. We'll have over 100 doctors show up from all over the country, and they all, as you said, they loved it. So it's good stuff, and we hope you have another good one this year and get more folks on board.
It's amazing, and it's amazing to meet other people who are working in the space, because as families will tell you, there are not a lot of OIT providers in the country, and that's why families are having to travel hours and hours and hours. And when you're doing something like oral immunotherapy, I mean, it's every 2 weeks for 6 months, and so I know some of our listeners are going to be very excited to hear that more doctors are going to be learning about oral immunotherapy. More of us can offer it. What'd you
But
say?
it does help because early on, patients will come and sometimes say, "Why are you the only one doing it? Why are so few doing it? Is it really legit?"
Mm-hmm.
So having more people has added legitimacy to it. So that does help us. We want to prove that we're not fringe doctors doing this by no means anymore. That's not the case. Well, what always happens, there's always some people that kind of spoil a good time. There are some people taking advantage of this, or a couple of clinics that are doing a little offbeat stuff. So they always got to watch that, and we hope people aren't getting suckered into that kind of thing. So they should definitely check out our FAST website or speak to someone like you with your clinic who's dedicated their career to it. They really know what's going on and are following the science, it's a terrible term these days, but following the allergy literature anyway, and what works and not going over the edge and taking advantage of these people. Because these people are hungry for answers and desperate. And some of these clinics are like the snake oil salesman of old are taking advantage of some of those folks.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. And we always encourage families to find evidence-based information. And that's all we like to provide on the podcast or on foodallergykiddo.com. And oftentimes I link to the fastoit.org website.
Yes.
I believe that's the website. And you'll also have a great map. We're on the map. You guys are on the map. But it has a map of OIT providers. And so when families ask me about somebody in this place or that place, then I can look at that. I can look at that bulletin board email that you mentioned. And even if it's someone that I haven't personally met, I'm able to reach out to people and find good, solid, evidence-based providers who want to help those families that are looking for a way to help their kiddo not be as allergic anymore. So it's really exciting to talk about this. I'm so grateful that you decided to come on the podcast. Thank you so much. And the video version of the podcast for our viewers. So thank you so much, Hugh. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to make sure, any pearl you want to provide to our families who are listening who might be on the fence about OIT or maybe don't really know where to start?
Well, I'd say, we can do any food too. As long as we have a food source, we can desensitize you. Now, we haven't done shellfish yet because shellfish, we don't have a good source. I mean, you eat shrimp every day. I mean, you talk about these Asian chips or something. Maybe we could quantify the amount of protein in a shrimp chip. Maybe you could do that throughout the year. But we're not there yet. But fortunately, shellfish is not hard to avoid. It's not mixed in things. So those people do okay with avoidance. We're not trying to create business. We're trying to create wellness. There's not a problem. Don't even go there. So we don't really need to go to. But we can do other foods. We can do all the tree nuts. I mean, you got some weird legumes and chickpeas. Like the main foods, egg, milk, peanuts. So, we can do them together. So if you have multiple foods, we can do multiple foods at one time. So you're not going through 4 courses, 6 months each. We can combine, 3 to 4, usually not more than that, together, and people do fine. So if that's all. And I appreciate your podcast. You're doing there in New Orleans, so keep it up.
Thank you. I like what you said. We're not trying to create illness. We're trying to create wellness. I love that. Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Windom, for coming on.
Well, thank you, my dear. Appreciate it. It was wonderful.